What's going on, everybody? Cleepus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a quick comparison between the Samsung Galaxy A34 5G and the OnePlus Nord N300 5G. Now, as always, if you do end up wanting to learn more about either phone individually, definitely check out the description, where I am linking to several other videos about them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So with the Samsung Galaxy A34 5G, we're getting a 6.6-inch 120Hz Super AMOLED display with a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 390, and a 19.5:9 aspect ratio. With the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, we're getting a 6.56-inch 90Hz IPS LCD display with a 720p resolution, a PPI of 269, and a 20:9 aspect ratio. So in general, I wouldn't say either phone really has a bad display, but in pretty much every way, the A34 5G is quite a bit better. While the size and dimensions are pretty much the same, except the A34 5G is a little bit shorter and wider, whereas the OnePlus is slightly taller and more narrow. The difference in size and dimensions really ends there. Otherwise, they're roughly 6.6 inches, and overall in that regard, both phones are pretty good. But when it comes to image quality, the A34 5G definitely has a couple advantages. First of all, with the Super AMOLED display versus an IPS LCD, with the A34 5G, the brightness is a bit better, the colors look a bit nicer, the viewing angles are also significantly better. So if you're outside in the sun, for example, or really in any kind of bright area, the A34 5G will be significantly easier to see. And then of course, with the 1080p resolution versus 720p with the OnePlus, the A34 has a sharper image, and with the 120Hz refresh rate versus 90Hz, the movement on the screen is a bit faster and smoother, making the phone feel a bit more premium to use. So in general, on one hand, if you really only care about size and dimensions, then either phone will be perfectly fine here. But if you do want the better image quality between the two, maybe you're consuming a lot of content like watching videos, for example, where the image quality is a bit more important, then in that case, the A34 5G will be a much better choice. Now for storage, with the A34 5G, we're getting 128GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, and with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, we're getting 64GB with microSD card expansion as well. So between the two, clearly here, the A34 5G has a significant advantage, having double the storage, and keep in mind, this phone also has another variant that has 256GB. So in general, if you really want more storage, the A34 5G is definitely the way to go. But on the other hand, for the average user, if maybe you're not really doing a ton with your phone, but you need something that has at least enough storage to get by, 64GB, while not really being spectacular, is at least acceptable. So if you're more of a light user, the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, especially considering this phone does at least have microSD card expansion, should at least be okay. For security features, both phones have Face Unlock, and they both have fingerprint scanners. With the A34 5G, it's right here in the display, so definitely nice and premium looking. And with the OnePlus, it's on the power key. But starting with the A34 5G, let's give them a try. There we go. One more time. And there we go. And now for the OnePlus. There we go. One more time. And there we go. So as you can see there, both fingerprint scanners worked real well. No issues at all. And again, both phones do have Face Unlock too, so if you want to use that instead, you always can. Now for the camera setups, with the Samsung Galaxy A34 5G, up front, we got a 13 megapixel selfie camera. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 48 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel ultra wide camera, and a 5 megapixel macro camera. For video, this phone has a max recording quality of 4K in both the rear and front cameras, so definitely nice to see. With the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, up front, we got a 16 megapixel selfie camera. Then on the back, we got a dual camera setup with a 48 megapixel main camera and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. And then for video, this phone does max out at 1080p in both the rear and front cameras, so no 4K here. So for what they are, both phones do have good camera setups, but in pretty much every way, the A34 5G is a bit better. First of all, this phone does have quite a few more features. With this phone, we are getting an ultra wide camera and a macro camera, and 4K video recording, whereas unfortunately with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, aside from the main camera and portrait mode, we're really getting nothing else. Now this is not really the end of the world, because I know a lot of people don't even use the ultra wide camera or macro camera really at all, so if that's you, you probably won't really care too much. And keep in mind, with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, despite the camera setup being relatively featureless, the photo quality is actually really good. So if you're going to be taking a lot of normal pictures or maybe using portrait mode, and that's really all you're doing with the camera anyway, this phone will be perfectly fine. On the other hand though, the A34 5G clearly has quite a few more features, and the 4K video really helps a lot, especially if you're someone who's recording a lot of videos, so that's definitely good. But in addition to this, I do think between the two, the photo quality with the A34 5G is noticeably better. Now, it's not really in a completely different league, I would say, but if you really do want the better photo quality between the two, then there's really no question. The A34 5G is definitely at least a bit better. But again, I do want you to keep in mind, the OnePlus Nord N300 5G does not have a bad camera by any means. And again, if you don't really care about not having an ultra-wide camera or a macro camera, for most people, the photo quality with this phone will be perfectly fine. Now, to give you an idea of what they can do, first, here's some pictures taken with the Samsung Galaxy A34 5G. So overall, great quality here. Maybe not quite as good as something like a Samsung Galaxy S21 FE or a Google Pixel 6a that aren't exactly top of the line flagship phones, but are still a clear step up from this. So yeah, the A34 5G isn't quite at that level, but for a mid-range phone, keep in mind this phone is going for like $327 at least in the US. So for what it is, I do think the photo quality is pretty impressive. And then here's some pictures taken with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G. So again, on one hand, I do think the A34 5G is a bit better, but at the same time, for the average user, for pretty much anything you could think of, something like Instagram for example, or sending photos to friends and family, or maybe even Snapchat where the quality isn't really that important, really no matter what, unless you're really focused on the camera, the OnePlus Nord N300 5G is still going to be perfectly fine. So on one hand, is the A34 5G a bit better? I do think it is, but on the other hand, will most people be fine with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G? In my opinion, also yes. Now for the RAM and processor, with the A34 5G, we're getting 6GB of RAM with the MediaTek Dimensity 1080 processor. With the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, we're getting 4GB of RAM with the MediaTek Dimensity 810. So between the two, on one hand, I would say the A34 5G is significantly faster. This phone isn't quite flagship level, but it's definitely close, especially considering this is a pretty affordable phone. But on the other hand, the OnePlus Nord N300 5G is really not slow at all either. So for more basic daily activities like web browsing, social media, watching the occasional video every now and then, and maybe something like light mobile gaming where you're not doing too much but still more moderate kind of tasks, in that case, this phone will be perfectly fine. But if you're going to be on your phone a bit more, or maybe doing more demanding activities, then with the A34 5G, you will get a significantly better experience. Now I did run a benchmark test on each phone using Geekbench 6, and here are the results I got. So again, as you can see here, the A34 5G does have a pretty significant advantage. So again, if you want the faster phone between the two, definitely keep this in mind. But in my experience, the OnePlus Nord N300 5G is still not slow by any means. And I feel like for the average user, you are going to get a pretty good experience with this phone too. Now both phones have 5000 mAh batteries, with the A34 5G supporting 25W fast charging and the OnePlus Nord N300 5G supporting 33. So between the two, really the only difference is charging speed. And honestly, it's not really that crazy. On one hand, yeah, an 8W difference is I guess significant, but unless you really need to charge your phone super fast, the A34 5G still does charge decently fast anyway, so take this with a grain of salt. But if you want the best charging speeds between the two, the OnePlus Nord N300 5G will have an advantage. And also keep in mind, the OnePlus actually does come with a fast charger, and it is 33 watts, so you can take full advantage of the fast charging right away. Whereas the A34 5G unfortunately doesn't even have any kind of wall adapter at all, which is pretty typical nowadays, but not really a reason to choose one phone over the other, or at least not in my opinion, but still something to keep in mind. But in general, both phones do have great batteries. With 5000 mAh batteries, you can expect to get some real good battery life and longevity. So if that is more important to you, you're not going to go wrong with either phone here. For the software, both phones do have Android 13. The A34 5G came with it, and the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, while originally having Android 12, recently did get the Android 13 update, and now it has like an edge panel kind of thing, kind of like Samsung's. So definitely cool. But despite both phones having Android 13, keep in mind, with the A34 5G, I feel like the software support here is more reliable. I know this phone's going to be getting Android 14, 15, 16, and 17, whereas with the OnePlus, it could get Android 14, but I don't know about after that. And regardless, I seriously doubt it's going to get all the way up to Android 17, so if software support is important to you, maybe you want to keep your phone for several years. In that case, I would go with the A34 5G, but as far as the current version of Android, again, both phones do have it, so definitely nice there. For other features, both phones do have NFC, so if you like to use tap and pay, either phone will be fine for that. But keep in mind, unfortunately, the A34 5G doesn't have a headphone jack, whereas the OnePlus Nord N300 5G does. Now, this is another one of those features where if you don't have one, even if you do have wired headphones, it's just gonna be kind of annoying. I feel like it's not really a reason to get one phone over the other, but just keep in mind, with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, if you do have wired headphones, you can use them like normal, whereas with the A34 5G, you will need an adapter. But in conclusion, which of these phones is better? In general, in almost every way where there's actually a difference, I would say the A34 5G is the better device here. Despite the displays being around the same size, the image quality with the A34 5G is significantly better. So again, if you're doing stuff like watching videos where you want really nice image quality, this is definitely a good advantage to have. The A34 5G also has double the storage, if not quadruple, depending on the variant you get. It also has a significantly better camera that not only has better photo quality, but also has a lot more features and can record 4K videos. It's also quite a bit faster, and it also has better software support. But on the other hand, the OnePlus Nord N300 5G is really not a bad phone, and if you're really just looking for something more basic that works for more normal everyday activities like web browsing, social media, watching videos, listening to music, and stuff like that, I really feel like you're not going to go wrong with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, and although it doesn't have the nicest display or the best camera with a bunch of features for the average user, I do think it will at least get the job done, and no matter how you get it or what kind of deals you get, the OnePlus is always going to be the cheaper phone between the two. So with the A34 5G, despite it being relatively affordable for what it is, for the extra features and better performance, you will have to spend a bit more. So if you are really just looking for something affordable that gets the job done for more basic activities, the OnePlus Nord N300 5G will be a better choice. But if you really do want the better phone between the two, and you don't mind spending a bit more, then in that case, definitely go with the A34 5G. Now once again, if you want to learn more about either phone individually, be sure to check out the description where I am linking to several other videos about them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, definitely give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipis Tech on Twitter and Instagram, and as always, I will see you in the next video.